introduce you. Oh, she's a great speaker. Oh, great. No pressure. First of all, I got to tell you, for the libertarians in the group here, I'm going to scare you as to how far back my libertarian roots go. Ron Paul for president when he ran as a libertarian. Okay, that was back in 88. Okay, if that doesn't, yeah, I'm getting old. What can I tell you? First of all, I want to tell you that I'm going to guess that there are some people in the crowd that complete amendment, and other people that are like, no, I don't like guns. And you know what? I get it. I didn't grow up in a house with guns. I'm not into blasting Bambi. I did grow up in a house where my parents fully understood the meaning of the Constitution and of all of our... So I was kind of steeped in what the Second Amendment was all about. But again, I didn't grow up with guns. So it was kind of different for me when I grew up and turned 21, and a friend of mine, actually a veterinary friend of mine, gave me a gun, taught me how to use it. Full blessing of my parents. It was later, after I graduated college, that I was actually convinced by the assistant DA of Harris County, that's Houston, for those of you that don't know. I was convinced by that assistant DA to carry the gun illegally. At that time in the state of Texas, we didn't have concealed carry. If you carried it, you were carrying it illegally. Now, I can remember this guy vividly. He was a patient of mine. He said, Susie, he said, you don't see this stuff. I do. And he was right. I mean, I was in an upper middle class neighborhood. I never saw any violence around me. But convinced me that you need to carry it. It's just a little insurance. That's all it is. So I started carrying it. He said, no cop's going to mess with you, even if they do catch you. So I started carrying it. And I carried for years illegally. Back in I don't know if that was before some of y'all were born at this point. It doesn't seem so long ago to me. But it was a beautiful sunny day. It was in October. And I was a chiropractor. And my parents came to the office and said, well, come have lunch with us. So I broke away, went to a local Luby's cafeteria to have lunch. And a friend of mine was the manager. And he came over and sat with us, and we pigged out for about 45 minutes, and the place was packed. I mean, it was boss's day, it was the day after payday, so the place was just absolutely packed. And my friend got up, we had basically finished. My friend got up and went to the kitchen to check on a couple of things. And while he was gone, all of a sudden, through a side floor-to-ceiling window, some guy crashed a pickup truck, came flying through the glass, landed maybe 15 feet from me, knocked over a number of people. And of course, I did what everybody did. You know, you think, it's an accident. I actually began to rise up to go help some of the people that he had knocked over. And then we heard gunshots. My father and I immediately got down on the floor. We put the table up in front of us. And remember now, this was one. So these random shootings, with one clear exception, these random shootings were not happening at that point, and it certainly wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. We're thinking it's a robbery. So we're down on the floor, we got the table up in front of us, my mom is down, we're waiting for the guy to say something like, all right, everybody put your wallets up on the table. Again, I'm thinking it's Washington Day, you know, the place is packed. But he never said that. He just kept shooting. And it took a good 45 seconds, which is an eternity, realize that this guy was simply going to walk around and execute people. That was his only reason for being there. He was simply walking from one person to the next. He'd take aim, he'd pull the trigger. He'd go to the next person, take aim, and pull the trigger. When the guy was maybe 15 feet from me, continuing in my direction, and I thought, I've got this guy. Realize now, we're on the floor, table up in front of us, purse is on the floor next to me. I reach for my purse, and then I realized that a couple of months earlier, I had made the stupidest decision of my life. My gun was 100 yards away in my car, completely useless to me. Because I was worried, just like some of you might be, I was worried that I might get caught with it. I didn't want to lose my license to practice. I didn't want to get caught breaking the law. I wasn't a lawbreaker. So there I was, completely helpless, and I cannot begin to tell you. Even now, it makes me so angry. I can't begin to tell you how frustrating it is to sit there and wait for it to be through. We were up in a corner. There was no way out where we were. At that point, my dad took my attention. He said, I got to do something. I got to do something. He's going to kill everybody in here. I grabbed him by the shirt collar, and I tried to hold him down, but when he saw what he thought was a chance, he broke loose, and he went after them. This guy had complete control over the circumstances. Total control. All he did was simply turn and fire. He shot my dad in the chest. He went down maybe 7 or 8 feet from me in the aisle. And this may sound dreadful, but he was still alive, still conscious. But I saw the wound, and I basically wrote him off at that point. The good news was it made the bad guy change direction. Instead of continuing directly toward me, he had to go around my dad. And he went off slightly to my left. And that was a really good look at the guy. And the stupid things that go through your mind. I was 31. This guy was, and I was single. This guy was about my age. He was built. He was well-dressed. He was cute. He had just plowed through that window in a beautiful brand-new pickup truck. I remember looking at him going, my God, what could be so screwed up in this guy's life? I would go out with this guy, and I know that sounds funny, but I remember that going through my mind. He shot the person next to him. Then he continued around the room that way. When I saw what I thought was a chance, I remember looking up over the top of the table. I remember thinking, what can I do now? Can I throw my purse at him? You know, what else are you going to do? But then somebody in the room broke out a window. A man actually threw himself through one of those floor-to-ceiling windows, great big guy. And people started getting out. People in the then smoking section started getting out through that window. So when I saw what I thought was a chance, I stood up, I turned around, and I remember back to the guy, and at that point, not knowing, does he see me? Am I going to feel an impact in my back? I reached down and I grabbed my mother by the shirt collar. I said, come on, we got to run, we got to get out of here. And my feet grew wind. I made it out that back window. As I stumbled through the window and through the glass, my manager friend came through a side door and said, thank God you're okay. And I said, yeah, but Dad's been hit bad. And I turned to say something to my mother and realized she had followed me out. Now, to make a long story short, I'm going to tell you the whole story. We ran across the street to an apartment complex over there. Let me tell you how long the shooting went on. I was able to go upstairs. At that point, there were already a number of people over there. Everybody kind of knew what was going on. I was able to go upstairs into somebody's apartment and make 3 calls. The shooting was still going on. My sister-in-law, who got the message on her recorder, could hear shooting in the background. When I came back down, at that point, the police officers had made a perimeter. This is what they told me later. Several of them were patients of mine. By the way, the police officers were in the building next door. And in an odd twist of gun control fate, they were not only next door, they were in a hotel room there, or in a Sheraton hotel. They were having a concert. And the manager of the hotel didn't want their patrons to feel uncomfortable by seeing plainclothesmen with guns on their heads. They asked them to leave their guns in their locked car. In their locked trunks, in fact. The precious, precious moments were lost. They later told me that when they got into the restaurant, they didn't know who the bad guy was. At that point, it was pretty much pandemonium. But they did see a woman out in the aisleway on her knees, cradling a man that had been mortally wounded. They said they saw a young man walk up to her, put a gun to her head. They said she looked up at him, put her head down to her husband, and he pulled the trigger. That's how they knew who the bad guy was. My parents had just had their 47th wedding anniversary 2 weeks prior to that, and it didn't occur to me at the time, but Mom wasn't going anywhere without Dad. 23 people were killed that day. The cops told me all they had to do was fire a shot into the, and this guy immediately rabbited to a back bathroom alcove area. He exchanged a little gunfire with them and then put a bullet in his own head. 23 people. Up until the recent Virginia Tech massacre, it was the largest mass shooting. I got to tell you, when it was all said and done, and some of you may think this sounds a little odd, and you may think that I've doctored it over the years, but you can go back and check the newspapers. There's a quote from me in the newspaper. I said, I'm not mad at the guy that did it. To me, that's like, we're not talking about a career criminal. We're talking about somebody who went insane. Somebody that went nuts. You don't be mad at a rabid dog. You might take it behind the bar and shoot it, but you don't be mad. But I was mad as hell at my legislators because I felt they had legislated me out of the right to protect myself and my family. Now, I've had some of you may be sitting there thinking, well, Susanna, yeah, but, your gun could have jammed. Well, okay, it was a revolver, and those don't typically jam, but it's possible. Yeah, okay, it's possible. Well, Susanna, you could have missed. Okay, yeah, maybe I could have missed. I hit much smaller targets at much greater distances. But yeah, I could have missed. But there's one thing I don't think any of you can argue with. It sure as hell would have changed the odds, wouldn't it? It would have changed the odds. So there I was, mad at the legislators. Now, fast forward a few years. I became one. We, as you know, passed concealed carry in this state. And as has happened across the country, when we pass concealed carry, guess what happens to violent crime? It goes down. I mean, that's just irrefutable. It goes down. Now, interestingly, what does happen in some states, property crime goes up. Not in all states, but in some states. Can you think why that might be? Anybody? Why would violent crime go down and property crime go up? Somebody? Yeah. And people live. If you talk to the bad guys, I'm not talking about crazy people. I'm talking about the run-of-the-mill bad guys. They're going to say, my God, no, I don't want somebody shooting at me. I don't want to die. I just want to rape her. I just want to steal that TV so I can buy it. But I don't want to die. I don't want to risk my life doing it. So that's why sometimes property crime goes up. They'll go break into your car, or they'll go break into your apartment when you're not there. Okay. Now, I know some of you are, in fact, probably a lot of you in this room are very legislatively oriented, perhaps, or at least you're interested in how government operates. I know I spoke to several of you that have government backgrounds or majors. Let me tell you, and this might be a little bit of a surprise to you, but particularly your friends, even if you're on my side of this issue, and remember, I'm not a gun. It's kind of funny because I go to some of these events. I'll go all over the country, and I go to these events, and these guys come up to me, and they'll go, oh, I got this AR-95 thing, and I don't have a freaking clue what they're talking about. I think I'm a gun expert. I have no clue. All I know is I want the ability, just the ability to be able to have that gun, to put it in my little sack of things I can use to protect my family. I've had people say, well, what about karate? You bet, go for it. That's just something else that you put in that little bag, just like locking your doors. I've had people say, well, Susanna, are you paranoid? Why are you paranoid? I'm not paranoid at all. Okay, maybe a little. But